If you guys can take a look at the screen, what you need to do for Hopin, because it isn't Zoom, is if you can actually double click on the screen so it actually maximizes the presentation screen. You guys can do that. That will be great. Because I'm sure what I see, is maybe a little bit different what you guys see. So if we can all do that. So as Chris mentioned, I am responsible at Tourism Burnaby for the meeting and events, and in general business development. And what we have seen is, and just if I could have everyone, if they could just, if you could just mute your mics during the presentation, just so that everyone can kind of hear clearly as well. That would be awesome. So as I was mentioning, the meeting and events sector, as Chris mentioned during his live keynote presentation, is definitely having a gradual and I would say a very kind of careful restart. I've used the tortoise and the hare example here as a way to kind of show that it's not a sprint, but it's more of kind of a longer marathon. And what my focus is obviously opportunities in Burnaby in particular, but also identifying these opportunities longer term. And that is really where I'd like to kind of just touch on today. It's not going to be an entire in-depth or very about every sector, but I would hope that I can cover some a bit of useful information for everyone. So the sectors I want to talk about are film and TV, technology, post-secondary, and then the construction and engineering sector. They're not all the sectors, but I would like to believe that they're some of the key sectors that are kind of key in our city. So the current reality, I don't think I need to spend too long on this slide. When you look at the data, a lot of the traditional planners would probably agree that over the next 12 to 18 months there's going to be fewer events. This is from the most recent Destination Canada impact report. It looks like most people are moving their events into 2021 now and 2022. I think there is still some towards the beginning of 2021, but again, these numbers are what people are indicating. I see Eddie on the screen. He's a meeting planner. He may be able to kind of attest to some of this data. PCMA also did a poll, and where they thought obviously planners were following the smaller meeting model or the hybrid. So it really does paint the picture that we have to think about how we can kind of adjust and move towards perhaps a more local, maybe a provincial focus just for the time being, at least for this year, I would say. So that's really where the current reality is. And just note, if you do have a question and if you're not on the screen, please feel free to either enter it in the chat box or do jump on video so we can have it. I want to make this more of an interactive session. So one of the sectors that we have in Burnaby is the film and television. So we have about half of all the studio space in Greater Vancouver right now. We have Bridge Studios and the Canadian Motion Picture Park. Both those are massive studios, and I've spoken to some executives at MPA, which is the Motion Picture Production Association of BC, and also ACSAFE, which they're actually an association located in Burnaby, and they actually have taken care of all the safety, and they've really ramped up since obviously COVID, because safety is such a big issue. And both of them described it as a very cautious, slow build-up. The way they've seen is that really the smaller productions are starting first, where the travel, it isn't much of a big issue because a lot of the folks are maybe local to BC and maybe neighboring provinces. What they are trying to do for September, probably before September, is they're trying to come up with a pandemic production guideline protocol, which can be used across the industry for film and TV, which is obviously a huge just in terms of giving you guys some numbers, is that $3.8 billion is generated in terms of annual revenue from the sector alone. So it's one of the bigger sectors. They, talking to MPIA, they do anticipate September to be the ramp up in activity where the bigger productions begin, to basically begin starting up again. I know, Chris, you have some work in that sector. So if there's any insight you have as well, perhaps you can share that. One thing that they when talking to MPIA, for instance, they did mention that a lot of the bigger productions, there is a bit of the risk factor as well, where you look at the big stars who may not be willing to kind of go back until it's completely safe. So when you have that in mind, I think there is something to kind of be concerned about, because if the really big movie production stars are not going to come to a set, then you really have to wait till you have a vaccine. The one thing when it comes to the hotel side on the room nights is definitely, I've heard from the associations that one hotel in Vancouver is providing an all-in-one service for the cast and the crew. So as the talent start arriving from California or other parts of the world, then the hotel sector does have an opportunity to provide these 14-day isolations, because as mentioned, people really don't care where they stay, because essentially the 14 days they have to be isolated regardless. So it is something to consider, and it's something that I am looking into as well. So the next sector, I looked at was technology, and one of the things that is kind of obvious with this COVID is every sector is impacted, and even technology. I think the general sense that I've gotten, I've spoken to the individual who manages all the technology at Vancouver Economic Commission. They're coming out with a lot of interesting reports about overall how different businesses are impacted within the tech sector. And just to kind of give you a little bit of kind of a look across the sector. If you're in a fintech or your financial services, you're probably doing great, because no one wants to use cash these days. So it's actually a really you're probably experiencing a boost in your revenues. But if you're servicing the service industry or hospitality, then you've probably been impacted quite dramatically. And the majority of the sector has moved to a virtual model. So it is something that, from an event perspective, you're probably going to see the tech sector become more and more dependent on tech and using probably hybrid and virtual events. The one thing also in tech is, you have when you look at technology as a whole, and Burnaby does have a lot of technology corporations, whether they're larger or smaller startups. The larger ones called the anchors are like the Amazons and the Microsofts are doing just fine. They're actually seeing their revenue increase, because Amazon is seeing more shopping versus the traditional malls, and they're doing just fine. Whereas you have the scale ups where depending on the sector, you're either doing well or you're doing poorly. And then the startups are really struggling because everyone is hoarding cash more or less. So they're not really putting a lot of money in startups. So that's where the technology sector, kind of rests right now. But they seem to be one of the more stable sectors, given that they have, really adopted a very virtual, work model. So post-secondary is the next sector I want to talk about. And I have a bit of experience in this sector. I've worked previous to this. This is, 5 years at a post-secondary institution. The majority of employees are work from home. And I would say that probably 90% of students are online based, with the exception of the trades-focused institutions, where they are actually trying to bring students back now into classroom settings. Similar to what I was talking about in the film sector, it is a kind of a slower, gradual resumption. We are seeing some students arriving now as flights kind of have been resuming from Asia to IVR. It is promising, but I think, you know, everyone has to be very careful in terms of, you know, maintaining that 14-day isolation. The institutions, got about, I think, 10 institutions now, or maybe a few more. They really have a clear preference to use hotels as opposed to Airbnbs, because they need to have a way to keep track of their students. So when the students arrive into Canada, they want to have an, you know, kind of a basic way to check up on the student, and just to know that, okay, that student isn't being lost in the first 14 days. And that's something that is a bit challenging with Airbnb. And, you know, they're slowly starting to get their message out to students. And I think students are going to start to trickle in probably in August, September, and then in October, we'll probably see more, depending on how, you know, hopefully, as you know, hoping we don't have another spike in numbers. And I think you also see that, you know, with post-secondary, there's a huge liability risk, and schools really don't like to take on the liability. So I think that you will see that hotels more and more will be seen as a very, very viable option for the sector. So the construction and engineering sector is an interesting one, because, you know, there is a lot of it in BC, and a lot of the operations are considered essential services. And, you know, construction companies are still maintaining, you know, their workforce, and they're still pursuing, you know, a lot of the projects and making sure that they continue. The one interesting one that we have in Burnaby is the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And, you know, the one thing that you will see with the Trans Mountain Pipeline is that they're actually expanding. So I'm not going to comment on whether, you know, I support or are against it, but I see that, you know, construction has not stopped. One thing that you know, speaking with some of the folks at the BCIT School of Construction, where they're really connected to all the industry, is there's actually a challenge in finding workers a lot of times, because a lot of workers with the CERB are not going out to work in construction sites. So a lot of construction projects are finding it very difficult to have workers, you know, sometimes even show up. So it's, you know, it's something that is a challenge now for some of these larger construction companies. Trans Mountain also from a telephone town hall, when it comes to housing workers, as they expand their project in Burnaby, they are doing more specialized, like they will need more specialized talent. So they raise the possibility of having hotels being used, but they don't mandate their employees stay at Burnaby hotels, so they could be in Airbnbs. So that's yet to be seen how that's going to affect our overall occupancies. So overall, my roadmap, as I've kind of described, is, you know, I want to look at 2020 as looking at event and room night business separately, because I think a lot of it is going to be BC-based events, you know, at least initially for the next 4 or 5 months. As I was mentioning with the film and TV sector, the all-in-one service option is very appealing, because I think a lot of folks, they want that kind of concierge service style, where if you're taking a crew from a film from a particular set, they want to be put into one area. They don't have to want to worry about all the different safety protocols. So that all-in-one service option is something that, you know, may be an option to attract more folks to stay in your properties, or in hotel properties. The emphasis obviously is on the small and local organizations. You know, now even these days, you look at organizations like Rotary clubs, other nonprofits, small businesses. They're doing small events that are under 50. They're still there looking, and you know, I've had a few recently that have been looking for smaller events, and obviously we have to maintain the 50 and under policy in BC. And I think one thing is really a lot of organizers are looking at the hybrid event options. So what I look to do and kind of build on the hybrid event that I had previously in mid-July is, you know, how can we support as a DMO and offer a hybrid event toolkit? And that is really one of the things that I hope to kind of develop here to make sure we can support, because I don't think this hybrid event model is going to go away in the next year or two. And yeah, with that, that's my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing screen, and you know, I want to open it up to everyone on the on our session here. If you have any comments or questions, I see some comments from Chris. Chris, can you hear me here?
I can. Can you hear me, Seth?
Yeah, also loud and clear.
Yeah, I still don't know why I won't release a video, but I'd have to reboot and probably restart the computer. Don't really want to do that right now. So I do work in the film industry as well, and I've actually started a production company on top of that to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there and to create content we can use in the event industry. But I'm going back to work on Riverdale in about 3 weeks, and I'm the assistant coordinator for special effects. So I am involved in the production meetings and the high-level discussions that happen with the producer. There hasn't been any market reluctance to come back to work from the actors. It's safer up here than it is by far down in LA, San Francisco, etc., where the actors are residing. They would rather be here, and they would rather work here than anywhere else in the world, and we're hearing that a lot. This was happening even before COVID, and our response to COVID has greatly increased our reputation. Regarding the putting the cast and crew in hotels, that is the crew that is going into the hotels are generally the above the line crew that would be coming in from the United States already. As yet, they haven't given us any directives regarding the crew's off-duty time. They're not legally allowed to tell us what we can or cannot do in off-duty time, but they are basically highly encouraging us to be safe and to think of our coworkers when we're planning our events on the weekend.
Is there, and that's a really good point now that, it shows that, you guys are really getting back and ramping up. Is there something from our side that we can do to kind of support, the studios, whether it's with giving, with the post-secondaries, we give a bit of a travel subsidy to make sure that, okay, when you get off at the airport, that, your Uber or your taxis are going to be,
all our own transportation. So that's all handled in-house. We generally will handle everything. On the other hand, the productions will accept as much money as you're willing to give them. But it is a black hole. It's just going to go into the pot, and the pot's got the bottom, right?
Right. I just, because I know the two studios that we have are, I mean, again, like when people are isolating, I always think about it. You're not really constrained to be in any one city, like, because when you're isolating, it doesn't really matter. You could be in, Chilliwack, or you could be in, Abbotsford for all you care, because when you're done, you jump in you jump in a taxi, or you jump in a car, and then you go to your next place, right? So to me, like, the isolation kind of feels like, you really have to kind of show I think the safety, you have to really show that your property is safe, and that when people go there, that they can be really, at ease about staying at your property.
Absolutely. I think if you want to draw people to Burnaby, the idea of supporting the hotels and in creating that impression is going to be very, very helpful. I've worked with Ron at Bridge quite a lot, and I don't know of anything that you could do that would facilitate, other than respond to their questions as quickly as possible.
All right. Yeah, for sure. It's hopefully everyone can, kind of get restarted here in the next month here. Carolyn and Eddie, and, I believe we have a few others on. We just have another minute till we are moving into, I think it's trivia number 2, if I'm not mistaken. Is that I don't know if you guys took part in the first one or not, but
it got cut off on my video. He started it, really? And then it cut the video off, and I think that's probably where I never got my video back from.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because I think we're going to have a second set of prizes. This is my understanding, is probably going to be different than a t-shirt in another minute. So I think I'm supposed to send you guys, is that, just double check the schedule here. Yes, trivia challenge number 2 starts at 10:35. So we do have to jump off. Any other questions at all? Or are we kind of good to jump off? Yeah. I just don't hear you there.
Carolyn. Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for joining my session, guys. And hopefully,
Seth, I'm going to contact you outside of this. I saw you were looking at facilitating hybrid events. And I've been talking to Corey about that as well.
Okay.
And that's what I'm doing right now.
Sure.
So I definitely want to talk to you some more about that.
Yeah, let's see if we can work together. I mean, yeah, I'd be happy to.
That would be excellent. I guess there's no point in nodding. You can't see me.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank
so
you.
I'll see you guys in the trivia.